Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Unnamed Fantasy Football Show. Lisa Matthews here with you, Zach Galia, and Kyle Odegard. Guys, such a wonderful time.
Because you won?
Yeah. It's the playoffs. And yes, I did. Yeah. Is it so wonderful for you, Kyle?
2 out of 3 of us.
It was a merciful end to my bad fantasy football season last week.
Oh, man. I think you should just get like a trophy for the best name, though. I will give you that. You had a solid name,
Thank
not
you.
a solid season.
Started off hot with the name, and then I drafted.
And then you drafted.
And then I got some players for my team.
What did you learn most about this season for you?
That I shouldn't have traded with you two.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, I think our trade was equally as failure on both sides.
Yeah.
It's all right. Just sit back and enjoy the playoffs.
I'll just watch.
Just watch from
Be a
here.
spectator.
How about we take a look at the scoreboard, take a look at the survivors from round 1 of the playoffs. As you can see, Fantasy Rookie took down Jake's Plumber right there. Ooh, in a tough round 1. What did you call it? The loser bowl?
The toilet bowl.
The toilet bowl. I was a part of the loser bowl. Got the win, though. Yay. So I see another day. I live to another round.
You're going to make the Cinderella run to the title game.
I might.
can feel it.
I have a tough matchup this week against Taylor's team, who's been dominant all year. So it would definitely be a Cinderella story. Let's take a look at the top 10 following week 13. Now, Zach, you were on the bye. How did it feel to see 2 of your players in the top 10? Just nothing for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was okay, though. Like, being in the top spot in the league, you know, you can have some weeks where some guys can go off and you don't necessarily need them. So,
Well, you better hope they do it again.
yeah.
That's for sure. Take a look at James White there leading the top. I think he had the biggest come up going from, I think it was a 0.9 performance the week before. And then, of course, his big day against the Texans. Rushed for 14 times, 79 yards, and caught 8 of his 11 targets for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns.
This is why fantasy football is so crazy, that you have all these huge name players, and it's James White leading the fantasy football scoreboard.
Mm-hmm. Now, Devontae Parker, 34.9, your guy.
Yeah,
Zach.
he's one of my many bright spots on my team, not to brag, but he's one of those guys where, you know, it's a Dolphins team where you think there's not necessarily much hope and not somewhere you'd look for fantasy football players, but Devontae Parker, he's had at least 11 points in his last 9 games, 6 touchdowns in those 9 games, and he averages, in the last 4 weeks, he's had 10 targets, 11 targets, 10 targets. So,
Yeah.
Dolphins win or lose, at least Devontae Parker's getting some catches for my fantasy team.
Yeah, 159 yards and 2 touchdowns in that.
Speaking of targets, Robert Woods is next on that.
Yeah.
Oof. You know, this one hurt me, of course. It was painful to watch as far as for the Cardinals side, but definitely helped me get my win last week. Hauled in 13 of 19 targets for 172 yards in the Rams' 34-7 victory, as we know.
And that Los Angeles passing game you figured was going to be hot all season long, and it's been very up and down. So obviously a very good game for him. And it's tough if you've got Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods. Who is Jared Goff going to throw to? And is this game going to be a Rams game that we saw the last 2 years, or is it going to be more down like we've seen this year going into the playoffs? That type of thing where you have a receiver that can be either good or bad, that can sometimes decide a playoff game.
I mean, all year long, it was one of those situations where I'm like, do I start him this week? What's going on? I mean, between him and Cooks, I didn't know who would get the most targets, but definitely helped me last week in that event. Not the Cardinals so much. No. Alshon Jeffrey, 27.7 points, caught 9 of his 16 targets for 137 yards and a touchdown. So definitely should be in lineups this week, I would say, going forward. Obviously, as people are deep into the playoff race, are not so deep, Kyle. I mean, if you look at this top 10 list, though, there are some names here that are just kind of unexpected going into week 13. I mean, we've seen a lot of Christian McCaffrey's, obviously, and Russell Wilson. And
Lamar Jackson.
And you're not seeing them this week. But some guys stepping up, Rashad Penny, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's obviously a free agent, had a big week in week 13.
It's amazing. Like in the Rashad Penny case, he obviously did not have a great season up to that point, and now he plays really well, and it seems like they're trusting him more and giving him more opportunities. And it's the same thing where if you grab him and you put him at the flex position and he goes off like that, That's once again, I feel like these are the type of guys that decide games in the playoffs when you can get a James White or a Rashad Penny that you put in and that guy gives you 30 points. That's a game changer.
Yeah, and it's those bold decisions, right? Like if you have Chris Carson and you're riding him all year, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, Rashad Penny's now potentially the guy. It's like, you have to make those bold decisions, and same with James White. It's you may have him on your bench all this time, and you have Sony Michel, and you never know who's going to get the most touches, especially in New England, and then he goes off, and it's just. Tis the season, I guess, for that kind of stuff.
Well, how much tucking, since you are in the playoffs, how much
or
could lose this week, let's just say, all right?
I probably will after all this.
How much are you going to be gambling with your lineup in these instances, though?
I have two personally that I'm interested in. I have James Conner as my RB1. Obviously, he's been out the last few weeks. He's kind of trending that he could potentially play, but he might not play. So that's kind of a big risk. And, if James Conner doesn't go, I also have Benny Snell on the bench. So, do you go with a wide receiver in your flex, or do you leave Benny Snell in there? So some big decisions to be made there. And also my tight end is finally back, Austin Hooper. He's back to practice. I don't know if he's going to play this weekend. So... Well,
decisions.
There will be some bold decisions this week.
I look at it, you just have to look at your track record through the entire season and what has been working, who you can count on come playoff time. And I just have my roster solidified as, there's obviously some outliers here, not as I look at my roster. Yeah, let's go to the tape here. But just going to the guys that I know will perform, because this is do or die time. So don't take any chances here for me. I'm not much of a risk taker once the playoffs begin. But there are those. Do I start John Brown this week in my flex? He's been going off. Yeah. So that's a situation now that I'm looking at instead of Keenan Allen. So we'll see.
And I think, as always, matchups are a big thing. Like, my team wasn't very good, but a big reason why I got knocked off is the Ravens and the Niners played each other, and I had Lamar Jackson, who was fine but not great. I had George Kittle, who didn't do much. When you're playing against really good defenses, that's obviously going to bring you down, and that's the big debate. If you have a guy who's performed week in and week out, but he's going against a really good defense, do you keep him in? Do you look for somebody with a more favorable matchup? A guy like John Brown, I feel like is kind of matchup dependent. The Buffalo offense is coming on, and John Brown's been great. He's been a big part of it. But if you play good defenses in the playoffs, for the fantasy football playoffs, you wonder if he's going to come back down to earth a little bit. And he's probably not going to throw for a touchdown pass this week.
But that was beautiful.
That
was good. All right, well, let's take a look at the Cardinals' top 10. Obviously, not so pretty this past week. Not a pretty list here. Some low scoring, obviously, across the board. But when you look at this week's matchup going against a very stingy, good defense with the Steelers, some of these skilled players, it'll be tough to see how much these points will go up, even knowing the challenge ahead with this Steelers team.
Yeah, a fun fantasy fact, I guess. This isn't reflective of real football, but Steelers defense gives up the 5th fewest points versus the run, but the 12th most against the pass. So, counterintuitive to what you see on the field and how stingy that pass defense is and how many interceptions they have and takeaways. In a fantasy perspective, it's actually almost beneficial to look for your wide receivers in this type of matchup. Yeah. With the great pass rush that the Steelers have, I could see a little bit more dink and dunk, more short passes kind of rather than the big chunk plays. So, that could potentially play into, whoever might be leading the charge in the backfield to, get a couple extra targets, a couple extra catches, and that could be the difference in your playoff matchup.
And Kyle, we've been talking all week, obviously, mainly hoping that this last game against the Rams is more of an outlier. Murray obviously had one of his worst performances, had a pick 6. Do you expect him to bounce back against the Steelers team this week?
I think so. We've seen the Cardinals offense move the ball very consistently basically all season, and they did have one bad game, but I don't think that is going to happen again. You're right. The Steelers defense is very good, and knowing that Pittsburgh's offense isn't great, maybe this is lower scoring than most Cardinals games, But Kyler Murray, with what he does with his arm and with his legs, he's kind of proven to be a consistent performer. I think Christian Kirk is an interesting guy because he played a lot more outside receiver in this game against the Rams because Farrell Cooper moved into the slot, and that's more of a boom or bust position where Christian Kirk might not get as many targets, but he's also going down the field more, and you can get the 25, 30, 35-yard catches when you're more outside. So he's an interesting guy this week, and what Pittsburgh does to try to stop him, if they're going to game plan for him or if they're going to play more zone. So Christian Kirk, to me, is one of these very interesting starts this week as to whether you should use him or not. Same thing with Larry Fitzgerald and Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, Fitz 11.6 points last week, but the way to attack the Steelers is in the slot, so I would expect Fitz, again, the shorter passing game, a lot of the more dink and dunk, to spend most of his time there. So, but then we look at the run, Kenyon Drake, David Johnson, Chase Edmonds. We didn't see much of this three-headed monster. Obviously, the game got away from them, which the run game did not show up at all. So that was a problem there with that. But going into this week, we'll see. Do you expect the run game to have a boost? I don't know. It's just you can't expect the three-headed monster to really play into this week. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from a fantasy perspective, it's so hard to trust necessarily, especially this time of the season, the fantasy playoffs, putting in one of any of the three running backs that we have. I mean, all great players, all potentially could blow up, and you know, Kenyon Drake could have 150 rushing yards. David Johnson could have 100 receiving yards and 10 catches. You never quite know, but I would say that's one of those bold decisions where if you may not have someone that you're really comfortable in, and you could go for that kind of Hail Mary almost, there's always that potential for something to happen.
I don't think you can play Chase Edmonds or David Johnson right now because of the touches from last week with everybody healthy. But Kenyon Drake, to me, is a different story because he's getting the touches consistently. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. They do run screens. And you're right, Zach. I mean, the Cardinals could come out and use David Johnson and Chase Edmonds, and then you're in trouble. But since Kenyon Drake got here, he has been the lead back every single game. And if he gets the ball 15 to 20 times, even against a good defense, he can give you some yardage. And if he gets in the end zone, then you have a pretty good day. So Kenyon Drake, to me, I would still start him.
Yeah. He's probably the safest, I would say, of the three for sure.
Yeah, hoping to see more of a balanced offense this week. That's for sure. Now looking at Zane Gonzalez, your guy, Zach. I expect a bounce back week for him. 1 point.
Not his
used
fault.
to that. Not his fault.
No. I mean, he's been consistent. He's been great all season. So, normally when you see 1 point from a kicker, it's kind of reflective of a tough game on offense. So. You expect hopefully get 5 or 6 and say, maybe that's 5 touchdowns and he has 5 extra points would be nice. But
he'll play everybody if that's the case.
Play that whole list of guys. But no, I think there'll be, I think it's going to be a much tighter game and maybe not as high scoring, like Kyle said, as some of our past games. But I mean, if you got Zane and I do, I'm starting him every week.
Hopefully we just do see an increase in these
just
totals
all of those would be
around,
like move them up by 10 or 12 each.
Just
would be
a little higher there. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us today. Best of luck if you're in the playoffs. Kyle, sit back and enjoy.
Best of luck, you guys.
See you next week.
Thanks, guys.